this afternoon into this evening's event, and be guided always, and so be it. So, starting a little bit late here, we do apologize. We would like to welcome our dear friend Julio again and share this moment with one another, right? I know many of our friends are waiting online to receive this message, right? I shared with a bunch of friends, not only here in the US, but elsewhere as well. And so that we can all be guided, right? See, I'm speaking again. So we would like to present today, Julie would like to present today, which asteroid are you from? Saint the Angeles, right? Julio, I don't have your full biography here. I do apologize. But as we can, as a good friend, has been with us, has been coming to the SSP for quite some time. And many of you have seen him online and share the work with us. Not only he helps with a lot of information, a lot of the knowledge that he shares in Spiritism, but he provokes us, right? That when we think that we understand something, he drops that question, right? He drops that line. It's like, I didn't think about that. And hopefully today it will be the same, right? Because that's his character, to really brings us closer to Spiritism, closer to the teachings that we wish so much to receive. And for that, we already would like to say thank you, Julio, for all of this and all of your dedication to this work, not only here with us at SSB, but in the Spiritist community as well. So thank you. We'll pass the word to you soon. I would just like to remind everyone to please turn off your cell phones. We will have a short break in between. I know this is a little bit, we're starting a little bit late, but we'll have a short break. We'll be given the ability to stand, drink some water, so I have some refreshments. And then at the end, as usual, we'll have the comments and questions if you have any, and be able to share our thoughts about it. Thank you. Julio, please.
Okay, thank you, Leo. Okay, so I have my cell phone here with me, but don't worry. It is just to keep me right on track, okay? Especially with the break and everything. Very well. Thank you kindly for the invitation, having me here. And let us start this meeting by saying thank you to all of you who are here, wishing everyone a good afternoon, to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters from this plane of existence, also our brothers and sisters from the spiritual realm, our mentors, benefactors, benefactresses, and also the brothers and sisters who are following us online. It's a pleasure to be here. And I know that the title of this talk seems a little bit strange, but I believe you will understand very quickly where I got that from and why I wasn't more forthcoming about it. Because if I had, maybe some of you wouldn't be here because you would have thought about it in a different way. So that is the topic, which asteroid are you from? And as a subtopic, we actually have the Saint the Angelis as a subtitle, if you prefer. All right, this is the first talk that I've ever given that has a subtitle, and a subtitle that is hidden in a way. So let us try to understand what this is. So just briefly, this is what we are going to discuss. Some of these are very, very short, just one slide or not even a slide. So you don't have to worry about having so many things over there. And we have these topics on the first part of the talk, and then the last three after our break. And I'll try to stay with the time and have it divided roughly in half. So what is all this about asteroids? Basically, it is about growing up. We know that we all grow old. That is a determinism in life, a physical life. But the question is, how many of us actually grow up as we grow old? And this was a question that has been, this is a question that has been put forward by many philosophers, but also by other individuals that are not philosophers necessarily, they're not theologians, but they were also interested in understanding, and they contribute quite a lot to the field. So this is an interesting thing. I'm going to show you here a picture. And I want to ask you a favor. If you have seen this picture, you know what it is, keep it to yourself. Please do not tell the others. We will spoil the surprise. But even if you know about the picture, stay with us because you might find something surprising at the end, right? So in terms of aging, we know we all age. We all grow old. The question is, do we mature? Do we grow up in this process? So let us look at the picture. What do you think that is? What that represents? And you don't have to say anything unless you want to verbalize your opinion, but it's for you to keep in your heads right now. And what do you think it is? Is it just like a blob, a brown blob? Does it look like a hat, like a fedora, right? And does it look like a mountain or a little mole or something, not so high as a mountain? You may have many different ideas. And I bet that most of you got it wrong, as I did when I first saw it. So the question here is the following. This picture is related to our ability to grow old, but not necessarily grow up. There is something that sometimes we lose in the process of growing old because of the way we interact with one another in society. And this is what we have to change. We'll still grow old. That is a biological fact. But we would like to have us, our growing old and growing up. So if I kept this picture there and I gave you this piece of information, that there are certain types of snakes called boa constrictors, like an anaconda, for instance. They don't have fangs, they don't have venom. They basically just swallow their whole prey whole. And then they don't chew on their prey. Now, once they have their bellies full with their prey, they basically just hide from their own predators so that they can digest the prey, which can take weeks, if not even a few months. So these types of snakes are what we are discussing here. And now, if I present you this picture, isn't it just possible that this is the picture of a snake that has swollen an elephant? Now, please do not say, oh, it's not possible. Yes, it is not possible. I know that. I know that very well. But if you say that it's not possible, you are one of us, one of those of us among us who are growing old without growing up, who are, in a way, losing that inner child, that not the inner child that is, for instance, a little brat, or that is mischievous, or that is disrespectful. No, but that inner child that brings us so much joy. This was the question that was posed by a French author in one of his books. And he starts the whole book with that picture. I took it from that book. So let us now introduce this author, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. whose name was Antoine-Marie Jean-Baptiste Roger, Le Comte de Saint-Exupéry. The place is now his last name. As it is very common in certain countries when we say John, son of Paul, for instance, like in most Arabic countries, for instance, they like to use that structure. And in some places, especially in Europe, they like to say John of place so-and-so. So here it is. His name is actually Antoine-Marie and so on and so forth, but he is known as Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. He was a French writer, a poet, a journalist, but most importantly, he was an aviator. As an aviator, he actually was engaged in fighting the Germans during the Second World War, until, because of all the bombardments and because of all the invasion that France had to endure, France signed an armistice with Germany, having all their troops grounded. Troops grounded and, of course, the Air Force grounded. And Saint-Exupéry had to actually stop fighting for their freedom. It is an interesting point, and perhaps you might say, what is that to do? What does that have to do with this point? Because it was so frustrating for Antoine-Marie to have his country invaded and not being able to do anything, that he actually moved to Canada, stayed in Canada and the US for about 2.5 years, just a little under 2.5 years, trying to enlist or trying to actually get these two countries to be more active in the Second World War, at least on the side of the Allies. And it was exactly during this sojourn in Canada and the US that Antoine de Saint-Exupéry wrote most of his most famous books that were written while he was alive. And even though they are not Spiritist literature, they're not Spiritist books per se, I do recommend the ones that I mentioned there, Sand and Stars, Night Flight, Wind. They are not novels, but they are very rich in content that keeps us thinking about ourselves, about our place in the universe. They're very rich in terms of the philosophical background. And he wrote another one, Le Petit Prince, The Little Prince, from where I took that initial photograph or picture. And this is what we are going to use in this lecture. And The Little Prince was published on the 6th of April of 1943. Okay? And this was just a year before he died. As you can see up there, he died in 44, when his airplane, by that time, France had rescinded the armistice, and then he moved back from the US and Canada back to France to fight for the freedom of his country. And he was shot down, his airplane was shot down near Marseille in the Mediterranean. And we only found the rest of his airplane, the parts of his airplane, in 2000 actually, but we still don't know what happened. It's still a mystery. But by this time, Saint-Exupéry was so famous, and I'll tell you why he became so famous. Because The Little Prince is the 4th best-selling book of all times. And it has been translated in a lot of languages, 250 and counting, including dialects, has become movies, TV movies, has been adapted to the stage. So by the time they found the pieces of his airplane, there were a lot of people trying to say, I was the one who shot Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Because otherwise they would continue to be anonymous to the rest of us, to history in principle, right? So we still don't know what happened to him necessarily. We still have not found anything else besides parts of his jacket, parts of his plane, and parts of his helmet as well. But his legacy continues on. And even after he passed away, because lots of his books, most of them actually, were published posthumously. And it was this man, using his own experience in life, who wrote The Little Prince in a way as very similar to an autobiography. Not everything there is autobiographical. This is why we don't call it an autobiography. But there are many interesting parallels. And we are going to look at these parallels and what they can tell us. The book. But before we start working with the book, let me tell you one thing. If you have never read it, please do. It is not a spiritist book, but it's almost as if it had been written by a medium in connection with a spirit dictating it from, the great beyond. You will see certain parallels that are quite thought-provoking. The other point that I want to make is this. I am going to go through most of the book, but not the end. So if you think that this is going to be something that you can use to cheat, to have like a synopsis of the book that will tell you everything, no, it won't. All right? So you will still be able to be surprised at the end of the book if you read it by yourselves. So having said that, the book starts with an aviator, very much like Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who is flying over the Sahara Desert, experiences a mechanical pain in the engine of his airplane, and has to make a landing, a forced landing. So now he's in the middle of the desert trying to fix that mechanical issue with the engine, and all of a sudden he comes around and he sees a little boy in the middle of the Sahara Desert. There is no city nearby. He knows that. He was flying over it. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry used to do the air mail to Africa, and he had to cross the Sahara Desert. He also did quite a lot of work coming to the South America, also for airmail. So this is another one. It's one of the parallels that I mentioned to you. So here we have this aviator in the middle of the desert with a broken plane, but a plane that in principle can be fixed. We hope, he hopes, the aviator, and he eventually sees a boy. But not a boy with next to somebody else, a little boy. This little boy has very distinctive features. He is about 10 years old, let's say. He is middle height, and he's gentle, meek. He's a little gentleman, if I may say so. It is because of this gentleness, this meekness, this ability that the boy had to provoke an empathy feeling in others, that the aviator believes him to be like a little prince. So he's not dressed like a prince, like a royal, or like royalty, but gives that impression. And this little boy comes to him and soon reveals another quality of his, a tenacity to ask questions and not let, not even an adult, change his mind from the answer, from getting an answer. Not the answer he wants, but an answer. And this little boy asks the aviator to draw him a sheep. The aviator is a little crossed with the little boy. For crying out loud, I'm in the middle of the desert. I don't have water for weeks, right? I have only a limited amount of water, and I have to fix this plane as quickly as possible. I'm not going to waste my time to draw anything to anyone. Even if this can be a figment of my imagination, I'm not going to allow myself to give myself in to a hallucination. But the boy is adamant. Draw me a sheep. Draw me a sheep. Draw me a sheep. And on and on and on. And until the aviator gets tired of it and draws a sheep on a piece of paper, gives it back to the boy, Boy looks at the sheep, which you see over there. He said, that's not good. That sheep is too old. The aviator rolled his eyes, tries to draw another one. The boy takes a piece of paper, looks at it. That is not a sheep. That's a ram. Don't you see the horns? And the boy is not disrespectful or anything. He's just adamant to get what he asked for. Well, he tries one more time. And this is what he gets. Hands it over to the little boy, and the little prince looks at it and says, "No, this sheep is sick. I want a companion for myself. I cannot have a sick sheep. I live far away. I don't have anyone to take care of it if something happens to it." The aviator is now completely out of patience, if he had any to begin with. He gets really upset, very frustrated. He wants to go back to his engine, trying to fix his engine. So he takes the piece of paper, draws a box, throws the piece of paper, tosses it in the direction of the little prince, very rudely. And the boy had not been rude to him, not once, just persistent. And he thinks that with this, he would just shut the boy up for good. The boy looks at the box, and says, "That is perfect. That is exactly what I wanted." The aviator drew a box that in principle should contain a sheep, the perfect sheep, the sheep that he himself could not draw. And the boy actually accepted it. And with this, they established a rapport. From that rudeness came a form of curiosity about the boy. He could not tell if the boy was real or a hallucination. Everything he would do would prove both. So he gave up on it, and he now is talking to the boy, interacting with the boy, and is getting information from the boy. The boy knows exactly what has happened to him. And the little prince, this little boy in front of the aviator in the middle of the Sahara Desert, came from a small asteroid titled B612. And if you are curious why it's called B612, wait, we will address that in the end. In this asteroid, which is very small, it's tiny, as you can see in the picture, he had for companions a few volcanoes, 3 actually, 2 alive, or live volcanoes, I should say, live volcanoes, and 1 extinct. But he always liked to remind everyone, but you never know when it will become live again. He even used one of the 2 volcanoes to cook his meals. As you can see, there are no stoves over there, right? The little boy also had a rose that we'll address in a moment, and the occasional baobab trees, actually their roots or seeds. Baobab trees are trees native to Africa, and they can grow to very large trees with a lot of roots. Their roots spread very quickly, very near the ground. And in the case of this asteroid, that could be a little bit of a problem. The boy lived in this asteroid, always gazing outwardly into the space, into the vastness of space, thinking what else was there, out there, that he could not experience because he was alone in that asteroid. But we keep moving. The aviator is now curious about the baobab trees. And what are these trees? Like I said to you, they are African, native to the African continent, to Africa. They can grow very, very high, and they can also have quite spread roots. So imagine, and the boy tells the aviator that there was a man who lived in another asteroid that allowed 3 of these trees to grow uncontrollably, and eventually their roots destroyed the planet. So the baobab trees for the little prince was a true, continuous threat to the stability of the asteroid he lived in. So he had to hold them, to weed them out before they would become trees. And that took him quite a lot of time, of his time. But he had also a companion, a rose. A beautiful single rose, exquisitely petaled. And the rose had a property that no other rose has. The rose could talk and would talk to the little prince. It was the only companion he had where he could rehearse a dialogue, a conversation. But the rose was also very demanding, very persnickety. Oh, I'm afraid of the wind. So the boy had a campanula, or a glass container, put around the rose so that the wind would not depetal it. The rose was afraid of the baobab trees, and the boy was even more careful about the baobab roots by hoeing them, by taking them out, by weeding them out. The rose was also afraid of tigers, because it would say to the little prince, the boy, but what if a tiger comes around and rips me to shreds with its paws? And then the little prince said, but I'm here to protect you. And eventually, from that, the rose realized that it also had its own paws. It had thorns. And it got a little courage, just in case a tiger would show up. But the little prince told the rose that there were no tigers in asteroid B612. And this is what the boy had. But eventually, it was not enough. And one day, a flock of birds was passing by, and the little prince decided to move away, at least for a time, for a sabbatical, let's call it, move away from his asteroid and go and explore space. The urge that he had by observing the outward space was too much. Even with the company of the rose, with a simple life, he still wanted to investigate, to experience what was out there. So he hoed as much as he could, was very careful about the soil to get rid of as many baobab seeds as possible or roots as possible, said goodbye to the rose, and moved away. The rose initially was very cross with him and did not say goodbye back. But eventually, as he was just moving away, the rose said, I have been a fool. I am your friend after all. Go, explore, and bring back lots of new experiences. And the boy moved away. He began exploring a region of space where there were other asteroids also named and numbered, in this case, 325, 326, 27, 28, 29, 30, and so on. We're going to focus on a few of them. You will get the gist by the end of 6 of them, what he was experiencing around that area of space. As the little boy approached asteroid 325, he met the king, a monarch, sitting on his throne in full regalia, scepter, crown, mantle, royally imposing. But the little boy was tired. It had been a long flight. And he yawns accidentally. The king was appalled. How dare you yawn in my presence? And the little boy, the little prince, tries to apologize for doing that because he thought that the king had found it rude. And the king said, no, I don't care. You yawned without my permission. No one can do anything here without my permission, including yawning. So the little prince apologized, and eventually they came to an agreement. And the king mentioned to this little prince, the boy, that he was absolute master of his domain. Nothing happened without his permission. He had no tolerance to indiscipline. And there would be always grave consequences to any non-complier to his edicts, to his commands. The little boy looked around. To the king, he was not prince. He was little prince to the aviator. So the little boy looks around. Can you see any subjects on that little asteroid? And yet the king thought he was king. He was not only king of that asteroid, he was king of all asteroids, all planets, all stars. So the boy decides to ask the king, "You're a king of what? You have no subjects, no vassals. You have no one over whom to rule. What makes you a king?" Respectfully, he did not do that just to spite, just out of spite. The king could not understand the question. He just kept repeating over and over again, "I rule supremely. No one can second guess what I say. Whatever I order must and is executed." And this conversation became very tedious. The boy would say the same thing again, "But you have no one to rule over." The king could not even understand the question. What was his problem? He was the king. His word was final. So eventually, the little boy decided, "I will not pursue this anymore." But the king had a liking to him. And the king actually decided to grant the little boy a wish, which he promptly told the king, "Very well, I would like to see a sunset." And the king was a little embarrassed for a few seconds there. And eventually, out of that embarrassment, the king says to the little boy, "Very well, I have ordered the sunset for you. And that sunset will happen at the time the sunset is supposed to happen today." Of course, young as the little boy was, he understood it very well and decided to leave because he realized that that conversation was infructiferous, was not leading anywhere. But the king had never had another person. So the king decided, no, don't go. I will make you the minister of justice. You will be able to, to basically execute everything in my kingdom, in my realm. I will give you all the freedom that you need to exercise justice. And he said, "But I have no one to exercise justice upon." And with that, the little boy decided to depart. And as he was flying away again with his flock of birds, he looks back at the planet, the asteroid, the planetesimum, and says, "Adults are very strange." And this is a story of being an adult as letting that inner child die. Like in that figure, in that illustration of the elephant inside of the snake. As we grow old, we allow certain social conventions to change the way we approach life. That freshness that we use goes out of the window. That somewhat constructive naivete is also destroyed almost abruptly. So this is why the little prince said, adults are very strange. He had nothing against adults. What he was trying to understand was, why is it that in adulthood we seem to lose that which was so precious to us and endearing when we were younger? But he kept going. And on another of the asteroids, the little prince met the vain man, an immeasurably sensitive individual, sensitive to congratulatory remarks about his person. The little prince did not understand. So the vain man said to the little boy, put your hands together and clap. And the little boy did it. And the moment that he clapped, the vain man was all smiles, bowed, and took off his top hat. And the little prince found that amusing, beyond belief. So he clapped even more. And the more he would clap, the more bowing, the more smiling, the more removing of the top hat. Until the little prince realized that that was kind of tiresome, wearisome. Okay, once, twice, 3, maybe 5 times. But now every single time I clap. But the vain man could not understand anything. He would say that he was the most beautiful, the most intelligent man on that asteroid. Do you see anybody else there? Well, by the same token, the little prince realized that his words were not getting through to this man. And whatever the man would say to him was always a smile, bowing, and removal of a top hat. Every time there was a good remark about him. So he decided, I'm not gaining much from this. Whatever I could gain, I have already gained, because I only get the repeated version of it. So as he's moving away from this planet, he says, adults are very strange. He keeps going. He is nothing but determined to explore the universe. And he finds another planet, small one, another asteroid, very depressing environment with a drunkard. A man sitting by a table, surrounded by bottles, some full, some already open, some are already empty, who's drinking, inebriated, and yet sober enough, surprisingly, to be aware that he was drinking and drinking too much. So the little prince begins asking, what is happening? Oh, I drink. I am a drunkard. But why is it that you drink? I drink because I want to forget. The man, the drunkard, answers back, forget? But forget what? Again, do you see anybody else there? What was he trying to forget about? And the man said, I want to forget that I am ashamed, that I have shame. So the little prince, okay, so far so good. But what are you ashamed of? I drink because I want to forget that I am ashamed of being a drunkard. And the little prince tries the same process over and over again, gets the exact same circular argument. Starts from drinking and ends in drinking. Starts from drinking, ending in drinking. So he couldn't understand it. And neither did the drunkard. So he decides that that was too much to bear. He felt empathetic. He felt sorry for that drunkard. So he decided to leave because he could not get through to that man. And as he is moving away, he looks back from a distance and says, adults are decidedly very, very bizarre. On the next planet, he finds the businessman. another little asteroid sitting sitting at a table, at a desk, counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and saying numbers out loud and counting and counting and counting. He says hello. No answer back. No hello back, no good afternoon, no good morning. Just numbers and numbers and numbers. But remember, one characteristic of the little prince was that he was a very determined, persistent, you may even say stubborn little boy. So he keeps bothering the man until the man makes a mistake. And he is very upset. He eventually addresses the little boy and says, I've only made mistake in my life, 3 times in my life. Once when a beetle flew from nowhere and startled me. The second time when I had some back pain, because you see, I'm sitting here all the time. And the third time, when I had the displeasure of meeting you. And he gave the little boy his signature answer. I am a very serious man. And continue counting. And the little prince, the little boy to this man, kept asking questions. The man would just spill out numbers and numbers and numbers, and always end his sentences by saying, I'm very serious. I'm a serious man. He said that he was the owner of everything. So the little boy asked him, you own what? Everything. Everything that I see, I count, I record, and I ultimately possess. And the little boy said to him, what, for instance? He said, the planets, people, the stars even. And the little boy said, but why? Why would you like to have the stars? For instance, if I have a scarf, at least I can put it around my neck, wrap it around my neck when it's cold. What can you do with a star? That is not important. I am a very serious man, he reminded the little boy, and said, I count, I reckon, I then record, and eventually own it. The little boy said, you cannot own a star. Nobody can. And the man said, I am a very busy person, very serious one. Who owns the stars? And he said, no one. I said, well, if no one owns them, then they are up for grabs. I'm a very serious person, so I take possession of them. Again, I count, I reckon, I record, I own them. And then I put them in my safe. And the little boy could not understand that. What would you do with the stars inside of a safe? He wasn't even worried about if the stars would fit in a safe. Remember, this is the same boy that in principle perhaps would have drawn that elephant inside of the snake. So he saw a lot of record keeping, no human interaction, and he decided to leave. And as he is leaving the planet, the asteroid says adults are decidedly quite extraordinary. And he's probably thinking now, are these the only adults I will ever meet? And then he finds a lamplighter in the next asteroid, the smallest of all of them, the small of all the asteroids, the smallest to such an extent that if you were on that asteroid, you would be able to observe 1,440 sunrises and sunsets in one set of 24 hours. Just to give an idea, if you just took 3 steps to one side or another, you would see another sunrise or another sunset, depending where you started, because the planet was, or the asteroid was very, very small. And this was a very distraught individual. He is there, he has to light, okay, the lamppost when it's nighttime, and then he has to extinguish the light at daytime. But like I said to you, if you just did like this, 3 steps to the side, it would be already from nighttime to daytime or from daytime to nighttime. So he didn't have enough time to sleep. And he complained about that to the little boy. And the little boy said, well, why don't you just keep changing your position, and you will always be either in nighttime or in, daytime. And then you'll be able to sleep as much as you want, or as long as you want. And he would answer the little boy, I have to light the lamp post, every night and extinguish the light every day. Then the boy tried to explain to him how many sunsets and sunrises there were in that little asteroid and how he could actually fix his own situation. And he would come up with the same answer. I have to light the lamppost at night and extinguish the light at daybreak. There was nothing else. So, same way as with the other ones, as he realized that he was going around in circles, he decided to leave as well. And then he says, looking back at the lamplighter, gaslighter, adults are downright odd. Yes, we are. We are bizarre, extraordinary, not in a good sense, and odd, primarily odd. Finally, we get to the last asteroid in our story, where he meets the geographer, a very studious man sitting at a desk on the largest of all the asteroids, about 10 times the size of all the other asteroids before that. And this man was boasting about how his asteroid was the most beautiful, with the most beautiful rivers and lakes and forests and mountains and this and that. So the little prince, trying to satiate his desires for exploration, for understanding the world out there, said, well, can you take me there? And the man says, no. But why not? Because I am a geographer. I am not an explorer. So the little prince stops, takes a moment, thinks about it. Says, but how do you know that your planet is the most beautiful, or has the largest oceans, or the highest highest mountains, and the longest forests, and this and that? The man would not say anything. He said, but don't you have them on your maps? He said, no. I am a geographer, not an explorer. When I have my explorers, I will send them out to collect this information. They will come back and report to me, and then I will make the charts and the maps. I am a geographer, not an explorer. And that kind of soured the little boy's experience on this asteroid as well. And just goes and says, adults, what can you do, right? But then something changed. The next one he visits is planet Earth. And planet Earth just mesmerized the little boy. Why that? Why was that? Because he was overwhelmed with its size, the population, the diversity, the culture, the multitude of people, the objects, the situations, the factors. He was particularly bedazzled when he looked as he was approaching Earth and he saw the lights going up, the lights, being lit in New Zealand, then Australia, then China and Southeast Asia, then eventually in the Middle East and Africa and Europe and the Americas. Not one lamppost, but millions, perhaps billions of them. That was breathtaking. The geography. This was a planet that he could explore. He could see the mountains. He could see the deserts. He could see the forests. All the things that he kept going around in circles with the other asteroids, now he could see for himself, explore them by himself, and experience them. And Earth had another interesting impact. He was, of course, surprised to see so much richness. And that motivated his curiosity, but at the same time made him long for asteroid B612, where he had only one rose, only 3 volcanoes, and perhaps the odd baobab tree root to deal with. Nevertheless, he decided to explore it. He climbed some mountain ranges, crossed deserts, crossed oceans, went almost everywhere. This with the speed of imagination. You can go, you can do a lot of things. And one day, as he was crossing a plain, a field, he overheard this chorus, very loud, "Good morning." And he turned around and replied, "Good morning." And he was then absolutely mesmerized by the sheer sight of millions of roses. Not just one, but millions of them. He had his special rose. But this was unbelievable. The sheer number, the perfume in the air, and they all spoke at the same time. But in much the same way, with the same idea that he had to deal with the peculiarities of his one rose, his rose, not in a sense of possession here, but in a sense of the one that lived in B612. Now he had to deal with the peculiarities of millions of roses. But that did not deter him. He found it quite surprising, quite invigorating, and he kept going. These roses reminded him even more of his asteroid. Continuing in this field, he meets a fox. And the fox has the ability to talk to the little prince, to the little boy. And the fox tells him quite a lot. Speaks of humans, speaks of foxes, speaks of belonging and need. And they establish quite a nice rapport. And eventually the fox tells the little boy, "Tame me." But the little boy does not know what tame is. He came from an asteroid where he was alone, right? So the fox explains to him what tame means. And he is actually quite curious. He doesn't understand why he should tame the fox. And the fox says to him, "Because I want to be friends." "But why do I have to tame you if you want to be my friend?" And the fox says, "You are nothing but a little boy, like all the other millions of little boys on this planet. I am a fox, very much like all the other millions of foxes on this planet, all the other millions of hens on this planet, all the other millions of roses that you just met in the field next door. But if you tame me, I will be special to you. And it will be the beginning of our relationship. You will no longer be one of the million boys, but my one. The one I miss if you're not next to me. The one I want to talk to when I wish to talk to someone. Tame me." But he was still concerned about this taming philosophy that came from the fox. The fox started talking to the little boy and realized that he came from asteroid B612. Got very excited. Wow, there are no predators there. There are no humans with weapons to kill me, to chase me. But eventually, all that enthusiasm died when the fox realized from the words of the little boy that there were no hens on asteroid B612. But they parted ways, still friends. This is the book, or most of it. Like I told you, I won't tell you the end. It's brilliant. The question I have for you, because, do you really think that I'm going to let you have 10 minutes of break without doing anything? That's your homework. Now you can understand when I tell my students, welcome to the Terror Dome. So you're going to have a homework. You have to decide if all of what I just said are characters or characteristics. I'm going to give you a hint. It's very quick, just before the break. I'm just going to go through very quickly, go through the slides very quickly. I just want you to see there, see the little prints underlined in red? Capital letters. Baobab trees, capital letters. Rose, also capitalized. And I'm going to go through all of them just to point this out. King, the little prince as well. Vain man. When did an adjective and a noun need to be capitalized? I mean, the noun, if it were German, I can understand, but this is English. Little prince and the drunkard. Notice also the drunkard, the vain man, the rose, the businessman, the lamplighter, or gaslighter if you prefer, the geographer, and all of that. So we'll go for our little break. And you will have time now to think if these were characters of a story or characteristics. Thank you.
Thank you, Julio. Thank you, Julio. We would like to just offer everyone a break. If you want to stand up, if you want to grab a bottle of water, we're not going to break for the food yet. I know it's enticing, but if you also need some, there's some instantaneous coffee back there, as well as tea, if you would like to. For those of us watching our talk online, we should be back in about 10 or 15 minutes, if that. So we'll be back soon. Little Prince would have say, humans only think about food. Thank you, Mr. Vaughn, for calling everybody back in. We should put speakers out there for days like this, right? Right. I don't know. We may get in trouble for that. Yes. Especially when I'm speaking. I guess we can start back. Julio, welcome back.
Okay, our intermission's over. Let us relax again. Refocus our minds back here. Not because I am behind the podium, but because that's what we owe our benefactors and benefactresses for being here to assist us. Intermission's over. Fun's over. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty and try to understand The Little Prince. Let us revisit the book. But now, no more literature talk. Now we're going to be talking about Spiritism. Remember the sheeps? The old. The ram that wasn't even a sheep. And eventually, the old, the ram, the sick, and eventually we had the box, right? So this is like a progression telling us something about expectations. Now, is a sick sheep not a sheep? Is an old sheep not a sheep? So we have here a clash of expectations. What the Little Prince asked the aviator to do was not communicated by words, and therefore there were a few attempts until the final product was agreed upon. But the final product is very strange, right? You basically say, here's a box, your sheep, your perfect sheep is inside. We can look at it from the point of view of lack of patience, restlessness. This would be one way of approaching the problem. But we ask ourselves, why the box, and saying that the perfect sheep is inside? The box must be representative of something. The box is where we actually incorporate certain traits and that we allocate in our minds. So we can treat the box now not as a box, but as a representative, psychological representative of characteristics and not characters. Inside of the box, we put what we think is perfect, or what we think we don't like, or what we think we do like, or what we think to be honesty, dishonesty, vanity, and so on and so forth. The box is nothing more than our view. It is not a container. Be careful. It is not a container. The box is a representation of our limited view of things. The aviator could not draw the perfect sheep, at least not the perfect sheep as expected by the Little Prince. So he draws a box and says it's inside. Open it, find it. So it is this idea, my limited visions of the world in terms of a sheep, or the perfect sheep, or the sheep you want. So don't treat the box as a container where you put things in. Treat the box as the limitations to our vision. Very much like the limitations that we see in the pads that horses use when they are attached to some means of transportation so that they can only see the road ahead of them, the way ahead, the path ahead of them, and they don't get sidetracked and get spooked, for instance. The box is that representation. Whatever is inside what's inside, is immaterial. Whether we have sheep, whether we have cows, whether we have, I don't know, roller coasters, whatever you think, it's not important. It is the limitation that I have to understand something in life or to meet someone's or something's expectations. Hence the box where the perfect sheep, the sheep that my alter ego, as some have suggested, the little prince, is expecting to see. Which is why the little prince immediately agreed that that was the sheep he wanted. That was the perfect sheep. Because he was also seeing everything from within the little box with the same limitations. Which tells me one interesting thing. I cannot be better than what I am. Well, that sounds a kind of weird, right? It's almost like you didn't have anything better to do or say, and you came up with that. No. Think about it this way. Our spirit, or I should say, our perispirit or spiritual body is nothing more than the material manifestation of our essence. It is not better, neither is it worse than our essence. I am an essence. I don't have an essence, but I have a spiritual body. I have a perispirit, because that is material in its nature, but not my essence. My essence is non-material, non-physical, quintessential, actually. When I, as Julio essence, come in front of the great mirror called the universal fluid, I create an image of myself. An image, this is not a fun house, okay, with distorted mirrors or mirrors that distort reality. It is a perfect, very crystal clear, crispy images, okay, of myself. The image is my perispirit or spiritual body. If I wave, it waves. If I go like this, it does the same thing. If I lift a leg, if I lift an arm, the same thing happens to the image. That spirit, that perispirit, that spiritual body or that perispirit are copies, material copies, which I prefer to say material manifestations of my essence. Neither better nor worse. So, this is why we can say that our perispirit or our spiritual bodies cannot be better or worse than what we are, because we generate them, and we generate them exactly as we are, now only with a material nature. So if I am not evolved enough, I am a box in my own way. I have my own limitations. So will my perispirit or my spiritual body. Neither more nor less. The box, which for this moment is the best that I can do. And it's the same for everyone here. Whatever we have is exactly what we are, and we can't do better than that. But we won't do it worse either. We want to come into the game fully prepared with everything that we can bring, that we have already acquired. Now we have the little prince and his asteroid B612. Look how small it is. Very much like the box, the asteroid B612 is also a limitation of our view of the universe. The box is a limitation of the inside universe. The planetesimal, or the asteroid, is a representation of the limitations of the outside universe, the cosmos, the creation. No wonder the little prince was so eager to go and explore other places. He was fully aware that he had nothing more to explore on that little place. Like I said, 3 volcanoes, 1 extinct, 1 rose, and maybe a few baobab tree roots to weed out. He wanted more. He wanted more because the principle of intelligence is like a prodding iron, forcing us to move forward. We don't know why, and we actually don't have an explanation from it. What we understand is always trying to move us forward, forcing us to look into something else. We don't know exactly why, as I said, but it does so. Maybe it makes us see what we are from what we can become, and that little difference is exactly what prompts us forward, because we want to get there. But then when we get there, we want to get a little further up. Very much like a rabbit that is running after a carrot that is dangling right in front of it like this, right? But every time the rabbit takes a step forward, because the carrot is attached to the rabbit's back by a very long pole, the carrot also moves 1 step away from the rabbit. So the rabbit is constantly after the carrot. Perhaps that's what it is. I don't know. What I know is that it's there. And even the laziest individual, the most idle individual, has this. At one point or another, that individual will just move out of that inertia, of that situation of doing absolutely nothing, because it will get tired of the sameness of his environment, the sameness of asteroid B612. B612 actually has an interesting story that I didn't tell at the beginning because it fits better here. It was discovered, this is from the book, by a Turkish scientist. When he presented his findings in an international conference, he used his usual costume, which for him was an everyday type of clothing. He was mocked at, berated, and his investigations, his calculations, everything that he did scientifically was ignored. But then he had another idea. The following time, he went to the same conference, but this time, after having been rejected when he was wearing the Turkish clothing, he decided to wear European-like clothing. And this time, he realized that he was not only applauded, he received accolades for his discoveries. Everyone agreed with his calculations, with his discovery, and so on. And asteroid B612 became a reality. What is this telling us? That we end up creating ideas from preconceived notions we have. With that, we apply to the rest of our brethren, our brothers and sisters, creating unfair assessment of them, impositions, and finally injustice. Did those detractors of the Turkish scientists actually went through the calculations? Of course, not everyone is capable of understanding astronomical calculations, but here what we are trying to understand is that all of them in that meeting were astronomers. Did they bother to look at the calculations themselves, or did they just look at the clothing or costume, if you prefer? Perhaps if they hadn't gone beyond the clothing, they would have treated the person with more respect because they would have been more objective as opposed to very, very subjective, being very, very subjective. So this is just another point that we end up losing, this subjectivity. Children, as someone just told me today, can be brutal. Right, Daniel? They can be brutally honest. They don't mean anything by it. They don't mean to berate, to destroy someone, to be nasty to someone. That's the only answer. But we like it to be polished. We like it to be very much, let's say, accessorized. It's like you take the truth, send it to a beauty salon, does all the works, and decides that it continues to be the truth. It won't be. But this is how we have been training ourselves. I am not saying that we should say whatever we want, when we want, to anyone we want. It's not that. Not go to that extreme either. But there is a middle ground, a gray area that is healthier. And we forget that as we grow old. We are sometimes in meetings, wherever we work, and someone is saying the most stupid thing. Of course, we don't want to berate that person, to make that person look like a fool in front of everybody else. But we also don't say anything. There is a complacency. There is a lack of motivation to educate that person. So the person continues to believe on something that is false. And we continue to tell ourselves that whatever that person has to say, even though we know it's false, doesn't matter. I call that a pact of mediocrity. I always tell my students, when there's a pact of mediocrity between a teacher and the students, it's like this. The teacher pretends to teach, the students pretend to learn. So basically, at the end of the term, if I don't grade them too severely, and most pass, good. I had no problems. I did not have to exercise myself. I did not have to bend myself backwards even to help the largest number of students. But the students also did not have to work very hard for their grades. It is a pact of mediocrity. And eventually that will cost. That will cost particularly the young ones, which here means less experienced ones. Not necessarily age-related, but experience-related. When we have these types of pacts of mediocrity, the ones with less experience are always the ones who suffer the most. So we have to be attentive to that. Baobab trees, they are not trees in the strict sense of it, but a representation of everything that is unknown. Because all we do here is cut them out, weed them out, hoe them out of the ground, out of earth, and throw them out. Because if we keep them, they represent a threat. Everything, whether it's in the spiritual realm, here in the physical, it doesn't matter. We have fears. The most primitive feeling we have, the most instinctive of them all. Attached to it is even the sense of self-preservation. Those who have no fear, and there are conditions like that, usually do very stupid things and don't survive to tell the story. Okay? But most of us who do not have certain crippling conditions like that will use fear as a form of self-preservation. So the unknown always brings that to us, fear, and we get rid of it. We don't try to study it. And the older we get, now here I mean age, the more we tend to fear the world out there and the less we interact with it. Because society in some ways teach us that. For some reason, we pass on our fears collectively. We exchange fears like we one day exchange what? Baseball cards? Perhaps? We actually share our fears in a collective, whether it's in a spiritist group, whereas in a county, or even a nation. We share our fears and even our paranoias. We have to be careful with the baobab trees in our lives. The rose. The rose symbolizes uniqueness. Not a flower, not even a rose itself, but uniqueness. Something that we recognize as unique to us. That uniqueness can change from one moment to another. It's unique at that moment in our particular lives, and only to us, nobody else. This rose was not unique for someone living, for instance, in Asteroid 330. The asteroid of a geographer who did not even know if there were mountains in his own planet. But it was special to the little prince. It was unique because it was the only one, his companion, his even soulmate in a way. So there are unique things in our lives, but they are not forever. And we have to establish this relationship with this uniqueness that we admire so much and take full advantage of this relationship, being a relationship, not a possession, but a relationship of care, of understanding. This can be even things, although as we understand in Spiritism, things are perishable. People, their physical bodies are not. They're still perishable as well, but individuals as spirits are what? Immortal. So whatever uniqueness we establish today with someone is going to be for eternity and beyond, if you will allow me. The flock of birds symbolize this eagerness we have to go out there and explore it. It is the principled intelligence that pushes us forward. Like I said before, I don't know how it's done. I don't think anyone does. But the point is, it's there. And it kicks in at one point or another. Eventually, it kicks in. I always like to say, this is a short story. Life is like a picnic by a river. Placid, with calm waters, always moving downstream. Okay? There are boats near the margin. And there is this cornucopia that keeps spilling out the best food possible. The weather is always springtime. We are all there. We have plenty of food. Gorgeous weather, always. Until we begin to get bored. That is not enough. That is a satisfaction of our physiological needs. But eventually, as Marlowe would put it, once the physiological necessities are done with, they are fulfilled, we want more. And we keep moving up in his pyramid until we'll reach the spiritual one, which is at the very top. Spiritual here as in spiritualizing, not in spiritist, by the way. So it encompasses all faiths. So we have this need to know more. We want to know more. So we take a boat and we abandon the picnic. And we keep, and more people keep abandoning this picnic until we are the last one. You're going to have a picnic with whom now? There's nobody left. So eventually, even if you are the last one, you will go down that river, because what is unknown may threaten you, may even make you fear it, but it also entices you in the most positive way possible of the word. The king. Oh boy, I rule over everyone, but everyone is a zero, has a zero count. So you rule over what? It's not even over whom. It is the part in us that seeks obedience, acquiescence, conformity, power, and control. All of these things are characteristics, not characters. And that's the answer if you were actually thinking about it. And different people call them, or different philosophers, different investigators, different psychologists, they call it by different names. So we have, in this case, if you look at Freudian, for instance, literature, you would see these as manifestations of the libido. Be careful with the word libido. Libido means a wish, a desire deep within us, not sexual libido, which is the desire for sexuality or anything related to sexuality. That would be Freud's terminology. We would have, for instance, now in Jungian, we might talk about archetypes even. You may address them as archetypes. And you keep moving. And here I decided for the word characteristics, not because I want to coin anything new. No. It's just that I did not want to give priority to this individual, that individual, and so on. I just want us to understand. And also because it allowed me the delightful play with words, character, characteristics. That's all. So it's chosen mostly because of the pun, the word pun, rather than anything else. So the king here is the libido, the archetype in us, the experiences we have from our past lives that we pull, right? In Spiritism, we have another word for it. Anyone can guess? What is it that we bring from our previous incarnations, right? Do you remember that? When we have an inheritance, sometimes we can say inheritance, sometimes we have a very special word for it. Atavism. Atavism, right? So this is actually just a different way of saying characteristics. We are bringing our atavic items, experiences with us. So this is the atavic inheritance, atavic need of obedience. I am so blind, so insecure. Now I'm going to take only one aspect of it. So insecure about myself that I manifest that particular insecurity by requiring others to obey me, to acquiesce to what I say, to conform to what I say. And I can only establish relationships based on power and control. In a way, and we are going to some of these, you will see in a minute that I decided for a certain symbolism here because they overlap. You will see this as what? Control. We have to control. And that means we have to possess. It's never a relationship of equal partners. There is no equality in it. And there you have it, see? The rings that tie one to the other. Now when we discuss about the vain man, now we don't need obedience, we need obeisance, which is our ability to react to remarks, congratulatory remarks, accolades. So this is related to the fulfillment in us of vanity, for instance. But it's not just vanity. It is even our insecurities. Because when someone is praising us, they cannot praise us and berate us at the same time. They may be thinking, but they cannot do it in the same way. And they can later on put a knife in our backs, very much like my ancestor and namesake, Julius Caesar, March the 15th. No, it's not. So you can speak well of the person in the front of the person, and then stab you in the back, or in that case, not even in the back, multiple times. No, so in receiving compliments, this individual is so needy for those compliments that the individual doesn't even care if they are substantiated or not. How many times we want approval, positive reinforcement, and we simply don't care. See if it rings a bell. I have this number of followers. I have that number of friends. They're all online. I've never met them. I don't know how someone can say that. I mean, but it's there. And we seem to accept it, because if it were only one person here or there, we would approach that individual and say, look, maybe you need something more constructive. We'll try to be responsive, responsible, and also educate. But it's catching fire. It's actually almost like a pandemic of approval by distance. I don't understand how that is possible. I really do not understand how that is possible. What type of interaction you have with someone you've never spoken to? You've never had a conversation over the phone. I mean, it's very nice to have approval at distance. You only have to deal with what the person says. You don't even know if that's sincere or not. This is our need for obeisance, or external reinforcements, if you prefer. And it's rooted in self-centeredness. I, or me, and everything for myself and to myself. When led astray, not astray, when we're led to extremes, it's just selfishness. Now, when I say these things, it's not to put it down, say bad things about people. No, this is for all of us to recognize these asteroids we live on, I should say. We live on. I have been to 325. I'm still in 325. 326. 325 was the king. 326, the vain man. 327, 328. So let's keep going. Here, remember the Turkish scientist? Don't be the audience of that Turkish scientist. What did that audience do? They berated his work. They never checked his work. Because of what? The clothing? Very well. You're probably doing the same thing. When I said drunkard, or when I showed the picture of a drunk person, when I showed the bottles, this is not about drinking. This is to show us what we do sometimes in life that represents a path to self-destruction. It can be alcohol, it can be cigarettes, it can be other drugs, licit, illicit, medical, otherwise, but it can also be based on other things. Individuals, for instance, overdo going to the gym and become completely deformed. They even cease to look like a human being. Why is that? Because the vain man or woman in them, the vain man here, don't think of it in a sexist way, okay? But think of it in the sense of the vain person, the vanity in that individual, the insecurity in that individual, the self-centeredness of that individual leads that individual to do something to the point that he can say very proudly, he or she can say very proudly, I am with a group. I am one of the group. And my group is a group of one. We have this problem these days when we want inclusion, for instance, the pop words, right? Inclusion this, or we want to be respected because of that and this and the other. But sometimes, not always, okay? These situations lead us to very dangerous corners where we actually want an exclusivity. We want to be a part of the team as long as the team is a team of one. So we have to actually be very careful when we want to hear others respecting us. Are they respecting me just because they cannot compare anything I do with anything else? Because I am a group of one? If I'm a group of one, how can I grow? How can I grow? We always say in Spiritism that I should compare myself to what I was yesterday, 10 days ago, a month ago, and a year ago, and so on. And that's true. That is the only real comparison. But I need others around me so I can observe them. And the comparison that I draw in this case is an evaluation. A judgment, not in a negative sense, but when I see someone, for instance, doing something very good, I judge it, because judging is actually, it comes from the French, juger, which means simply to pass an opinion. So I am assessing, I'm evaluating, I'm appraising. I look at that and I say, wow, that individual is being very constructive in that. Why can't I emulate that in my own way? But why can't I emulate that? That was a judgment, but not a negative judgment, a judgment based on gossip, on innuendo, on unchecked pieces of information. No, I am seeing it. I don't hear. It's not hearsay. I go there and I evaluate it for myself. I judge. Judges do that all the time. There's a judgment, an assessment, appraisal, but not in a negative way. They are guided. In life, we do the same thing. So we have to be very careful. Here is the same thing. The drunkard represents all of these fears in us, insecurities in us, that eventually take a very bad or a turn for the worst. But they also represent some sort of idleness, propensity to negativity, which will lead us to despondency, depression, ingratitude in some cases, and self-destruction. Suicides don't happen out of the blue. It's a path that will begin with that idleness, because the individual will not be fulfilling his or her life for some reason or another. This is not about blame, assigning blame or anything. It's for us to detect, learn to detect in us, because we also live in Asteroid 627. We are from there sometimes. Something happens in our lives and boom, there we are on 627. Drunkards, in the sense of despondent, negative behavior. Sometimes we even become ungrateful. Actually, not sometimes, quite often. We forgot about the other blessings we have received up to that point. We only see that little one that annoyed us, and we can't move past it. So be careful with that. The bean counter. How many times we have amassed items just so that we have them. As Eric Fromm beautifully explained in his book, right? To have or to be. The essence is not in having things, is in being things. How many friends do you have? How many people have you befriended, or are you friends? Are you friends with? It's not a possession. It is not a situation when I can count. Because if I am friends with one person, very good friends with that individual, it's better than having 100 followers. Because at least with that person, I can come and talk. When I am in Asteroid 627, feeling sorry for myself, I can go there and have a friendly face. A friend that may not even have a degree or anything, but will give me a shoulder to cry on or hear my difficulties. Perhaps, who knows, give me an insight. Insights don't require diplomas and degrees. Having them is good when you have to work. Of course, you have to be with a certification. But most of us are capable of assisting others. If not assisting, at least letting the other person have a catharsis, get all that thing out of his or her chest. The individual in 628 is a representation of ambition, greed, possession, individualism, again, domination. And you see, like I mentioned to you before, these things, they have overlaps. So if you are the king, you also have a little bit of the businessman in you. Why do you possess all the stars? Just so you can say, I have this number of items, so-and-so. But what does that do for you? What does it bring to you? Does it talk to you? Does it assist you when you are down? No. So be careful with 628. 629. This is the individual who has a task and loses his or her humanity. The person confuses his job, his work, the form of service he or she provides, with his own individuality. There is a devaluation of the individual, and the individual becomes the job, becomes the task available. He ceases to think like a human being. He ceases to think, period. I have to light, extinguish the light. Light, extinguish the light. Light. Just take 3 steps to the side. What we normally say, think outside the box. It's just a different way. That is what Antoine de Saint-Exupéry came up with. It's his French version of, I'm just joking, but it's his French version of to think outside the box. And by the way, if we have to talk about trademarks, he came up with this French version before we actually had it, the think outside the box, by the way. That's important to say. So is an individual that can be doing his or her job beautifully, but repetitively, without anything attached to it. There's a complacency, there's a conformism. This individual eventually gets upset with it. Remember when we talked about the river, talked about exploring? We want, it's built in us. So what happens is that eventually we lash back at the world, at people, at the universe, by escape mechanisms of compensation. We are not really addressing the person. We don't want to hurt the individual, but that individual may be the representation of what we are not. And because we don't have the courage to change ourselves, we want to destroy that individual who, when next to us, looks like a mirror to the worst part of us. We don't have anything against the person per se, or a society, a group, it doesn't matter. But that group, that society, that clan, that individual even, reminds us of what we are not, and we don't want that. So by mechanisms of compensation, and they can get down to serious aggression and retaliation, we lash back at them. So watch out so that we don't have in us. And if we do, let us find ways of transforming ourselves. The more we transform ourselves, the more we'll realize that we can get there, even if we're not there yet. And those individuals will not bother us so much. In other words, I should say, we will not allow ourselves to be bothered by the presence of those individuals simply because we are not what we wished we could be. Right? Because it's not their fault, as I mentioned. It's not that they are doing something on purpose to hurt us. And now we have the geographer. Oh my God, this is my favorite. This is, I must confess, and I cannot say too much about it, but I love when, let's say we all work together, and this is an office, not a spiritist center, and basically, I have a piece of trash, and I throw it on the floor. One of you sees it. So, Julio, could you pick up that little money band you just threw on the floor? And here's what we normally say: it's not my job. The center must have someone to clean the floors for me. How many times we just did even the shortest version of that? In other words, I don't care, which is the cleanest version I can say in a spiritist center. I don't care. It's not my job. And I won't pick it up. But I either accidentally threw it on the floor or I did it on purpose. I've seen people who throw things on the floor and they expect someone to clean up after them. People, for instance, with dogs, with pets, right? There's so many examples we have in real life. Or we are in the office, and it's not about dirtying up some place, but it's something that has happened, and then someone can just go there, for instance, and do, just change something. Simple. Let's say, for instance, there is an alarm of a fridge or a refrigerator in the office, and the alarm is sounding. And we know there's nothing wrong with it. Maybe there was just a malfunction. And you say, and that thing is bothering everyone. Beep, 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 beep. No one goes there and silences the alarm. Oh, but I'm not supposed to touch it. Silence the alarm and write down someplace or tell the person who's responsible for it. I noticed the alarm went off on this date. I silenced it so that we could continue to work in the office. No, I've had situations where I've seen individuals work through the entire day, 8 hours, with an alarm sounding in their ears the whole day. And that includes an hour for lunch. So it's actually 9 hours where that alarm, they came in, the alarm was sounding. They went away, they left the alarm on, and nobody did anything. It was nothing. It was just a mechanical pump that had stopped working in the mechanical room of the building. And when they actually came in and realized that there was a problem, the whole place was flooded. You couldn't pick up a phone and call the plant operations and say to them, listen, I am from this building, this floor, or this room. There is an alarm, but I have no way of going into this place because you need a special key. Could you send someone over just to check? It's not so much the noise bothering us, but if there is a noise, it was put there in the first place for some reason. So maybe it is something that could be a problem. Not my problem. That's a geographer. It is not his job to explore. He is not an explorer. So it is another form of personalism, of selfishness, and self-importance, because we usually do things like that for works, services, jobs. We think are menial, degrading. So putting aside the terrible judgment there, that's judgment with a bad connotation, right? Putting aside that, we are doing what? Overvaluing what we do. Who told us that what we do is more important than other things? Who decided? Oh, human society. Okay, And when you go back to the spiritual realm, will you have that? Will that survive the voyage back? I doubt it. So these are just 6. We could go on and on and on. And Antoine de Saint-Exupéry actually talks a little bit about other places, but these were the ones where we have the illustrations. These were the ones that he discussed more. He created dialogues between the little prince visiting the individuals responsible or representing these places. So this is why it's important to focus on them. But it's a very large carousel of characteristics of avoidance that we manifest by escape coping mechanisms. We have justifications. We have rationalizations. We have projection, interjection. We have compensation, right? So we have to be very careful. And these are ways that, because we know we are not doing something that is constructive for ourselves. Not right or wrong, no, because that is also dictated by society. But what is constructive or not to ourselves. And we know when we are not being constructive, first and foremost to ourselves. But for some reason or another, we are very odd. Because we develop these mechanisms as we mature, let's say, or as we age, as we go into adulthood. And we bring some of these behaviors from past lives. We need to do our best, not feel bad about them. No, embrace them. Embracing them means be aware of them and pick 1 or 2, whatever, and try to polish them out of your psyche, of your personality, because they are only holding us back. And being very careful. Learning is the most important thing. When we talk about Earth here, why is Earth so important? Why is Earth different than all the other asteroids? Because it's what we know. Nobody can talk about Mars. Oh, but we have been to the moon. Not even the moon. We don't live there. We don't know if there's a 7-Eleven there. There are McDonald's. We don't know what life is on the moon. We know what it is on Earth. And even there, within that box, remember the limited vision that we have of the universe? Only in the area where we live. Under certain special conditions. If we were to be airlifted from the place where we are and moved to another area, we would have to learn a lot of things from scratch. So in order for us to grow up, because we all grow old naturally, we don't have even to make any effort to grow old, but in order to grow up, that requires effort. We must continuously allow ourselves to experiment with the world, to experience that world. Be careful with quantities. In the great customs officer of the spiritual realm, no one is going to ask you how many, unless we're talking about how many did you love, how many did you help. But nobody is going to ask you how many or how much did you have. What they will ask is, how did you do things? Oh, you were unsuccessful. Fine, but what was your intention? Did you have love in your heart? Did you have the intention to assist? It didn't work, right? You tried to save that person's life from an accident, but the person was past your assistance. So the person passed away anyway. But did you try? Did you do what was your best at the time? If you did, you are a success story for us here. They will not ask you numbers in counting operations. So the roses, even though they were by the millions or even thousands if you prefer, not the millions necessarily, but thousands, and they were polite, they were not the little princess rose. He had no attachment to them. It was a beauty on the outside. And the only reason why he realized and he was bedazzled by the sheer number of roses is because he had one special rose that he could use to guide his emotions. He transferred what that rose represented to him by the number of these roses. But if he had had the time to interact with all, let's say 1,000 of those roses, he perhaps would not find a single one as special as the one that had been and is his special rose. Numbers, very much like adults, are also very, very bizarre. The more you have of one thing, and you can talk to an economist, I'm not competent to do that. The more you have of one thing, the less value, the lower the value it has. Okay? Diamonds are precious, not because they reflect light, because those who reflect light with a certain crystal clarity are rare. Relationships that are not based on possession but are true relationships of any kind are rare. We establish a rapport, a uniqueness that only happens between those two sides, nobody else. I say sides because it can be a relationship with one person, with a spiritual center, with a city, with a country, okay? It can be with another group or society. So the more we have of these things, the less valuable they are. And the fox. Should we tame our friends? We have to be very careful with the word tame here. I kept the word tame because that's what we find in the original. Okay? It is tame. But the fox is saying by taming, finding something that is unique between the two sides. Not in the sense of, if I tame you, you are now my property, which is usually what we attribute to the word. But in the sense of, the two of us are now linked by that uniqueness. We forge a link. It's like in the crucible of life, we have been forged, amalgamated together. Like two metals that become now an alloy, a different thing, different from each one of the two metals that went in to make that alloy. So this is the concept of taming, finding between the two sides in any relationship something that is unique, that only happens between those two, nothing else. If you allow me to paraphrase Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, what is essential, and this is my part, in the physical life is invisible to the eye. And I added that because this is a spiritist talk, and we know that in the spiritual realm, we cannot fake. We cannot be insensitive. We can try, but it won't work. So here, in the physical life, what is essential is invisible to the eye. In other words, goes way down into our skin. It's not just skin deep, but much more than that. Much more, much deeper than that. Much more profound than that. And in order for us to be aware of it, we need time. Time to get to one another. Time to know one another. Sometimes getting to one another is important. This is what I say, get to one another in the sense of, I cannot have millions and millions of friends out there and not ever having interacted with them. We need to be near people. There are special cases like when we had the pandemic, when we couldn't be near them, but that was temporary, not permanent. We cannot have that situation permanently. We must dedicate ourselves to establishing these uniqueness, these situations of uniqueness. And What we need now is when we address a child, in other words, a person with less experience, let us be careful. Because Jesus told us very clearly that if we wanted to get into the kingdom of heaven, we needed to be more like a child. Not like a child in the sense of being naughty, in the sense of not knowing what we are doing. No, we are, after all, maturing if we would like to be in that situation. But in the sense of like, not exactly the same. So when we have a child drawing that elephant inside of the boa constrictor, we know that an elephant cannot fit there, that that snake will not be able to unhinge its jaws to swallow an entire elephant whole. But let us not destroy that eagerness that the child has to see the world. Oh, but it's naive. Yes, it is naive. But there are ways we can tell that the snakes can eat quite big animals, let's say, without just destroying what they had in their minds, that idea. Let us, amongst ourselves, be gentler, more understanding, okay? More Christian even. We can educate without traumatizing. We can explain without berating. Because if we don't do that, I ask myself, what is that I'm taking from Spiritism? If I am exposed to all of these marvelous things, but I'm not using them, I am failing to use them also in my personal life, my daily life. So teach, yes. Educate, yes. But don't destroy dreams. Do not go overboard in trying to be so correct that you're like the lamplighter. All you see is if the lamp is lit or not. You forget even about the lamppost. You ruin a child's dreams, a child's naivete, that beautiful thing that a child shows. This again, not child, but a person with less what? With less experience. And you create a cynical instead. You take someone who is all eagerness towards learning, and you transform that individual into a cynical person. And we do that to ourselves in society. We have to be careful with that. So having said all this, to all of you, the greatest question of the lecture is, which asteroid are you from? Or are you just hopping from one to the next? Which asteroid are we from? Are we hopping from one to the next when convenient, instead of really embarking on a journey of discovery, like when the little prince visited Earth and was amazed by everything that Earth had to offer? Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the Spiritist Society of Baltimore for the invitation. Okay, your attention, your questions, if you have any, I'm here.
Thank you, Julio. We will certainly open for questions. Before, I would like to ask you to move this way, because I would like to bring it over here. Yeah. He threw on the ground and he picked it up. Just want to make sure that we... Go ahead, Julie. Go ahead. No, I want to put this on the screen for the question.
I had something for the prayer moment.
Okay. Daniel, why am I losing the signal? Connection is good. Yes. Oh, you got it. Okay, I see. I see what it is. Yes.
I can tell you, like you tell them if he's going to be able to check it.
Now.
Yeah, no. If you go back here, then you stop. They have to be.
I guess we're gonna leave it here,
Yeah, no.
and then I'll have to
What do you want?
leave it here. Okay. All right. You can come back here, Julio. Sorry. No, because we want to. We'll get there. We're hopping from stage, computer, and places to find out about ourselves. Microphone. Say that again.
Like the lamplighter, unlike the lamplighter who always does the same thing, always does the same thing over and over again, at least we have different glitches. It makes it very different each time.
Right. Thank you, Julio, once more. And this is an amazing, and as we mentioned earlier, it's enticing, right? You know, it's that question at the end that Julio always have to come up with, so eloquently that, makes us think, right, about ourselves. It is, we spend a little over 2 hours here, but well worth it with that final question. Obviously, don't discard the whole thing. We need it. We need the work there. But we would like to open up for questions, comment that you may have. We do have a couple comments online as well that we would like to share. Unfortunately, we won't be posting them on the screen, but we can certainly verbalize it. The floor is yours. I would like to start here with a question or a comment that you may have. Everybody's so quiet. Paula, thank you.
Just quickly, I have been vaccinated, so even if I bite, you won't get rabies. Don't worry. That's what I tell my students also. Don't worry.
Thank you for bringing one of my favorite books back to life. The characters that we just went through were not open to hearing what the little prince was saying to them. So what hope is there for them if we look on them as, well, obviously parts of ourselves, but people we run into in life?
So it's a very good question. So what type of hope, or is there hope, right, for the characters that wouldn't listen to the little prince? That those characters are like that individual that remains in the picnic, and eventually that person has no one to talk to. So yes, that person has enough in terms of food, in terms of good weather, doesn't feel the cold, doesn't feel the heat, but it's not enough. Once we have enough to satisfy our physiological needs, we want more. So these individuals, this is not talked in the book, of course, they eventually will listen to someone. It just won't be the little prince. But it will be the equivalent of a little prince, which is the alter ego in some ways, right? Is our conscience, as we say here in Spiritism. And eventually they will listen to themselves. How long it's going to take and how much they're going to suffer, that will depend on each one. Yeah, like the little prince, they are all stubborn in their own ways.
Thank you, Julio. Question from Alba. After learning that the characters of the book represent characteristics, we will ask, now what? How to create an improvement plan for our very own self.
So if we're going to create, let's say,
it's actually a
an
question
improvement.
as well. I can show it to you. I know you cannot see there, so this first question here.
Okay, like an improvement plan for ourselves. I think even before the improvement plan is recognition, is awareness. That is usually the most difficult step. When we need to say to ourselves, not to anybody else, okay? I have a problem with this. I am being very possessive in my relationships in the past. So let me look back and see why they failed. Not to criticize myself, not to put myself down, no, but in order for me not to make the same mistakes again. Once I can truly, sincerely look at that and become aware of it and acknowledge it to myself, the improvement plan, it almost comes naturally, unless it's something so deeply rooted that we need an assistance from a professional. But again, if I accept it to myself, I'm also going to be more open to find assistance elsewhere, to find a professional that can assist me. But until I do that, I will always be against it. Even if I go because of some reason or another, the work environment forces me to do it. Like, for instance, aggression therapy, or not aggression therapy, but individuals that go and aggression workshops, right? They have done something in the workplace, human resources came in, decided, look, you need to control yourself. You need to be careful how you verbalize your dissatisfactions. And the person may, in certain instances, be even correct in what he or she is bringing up, but the way it is done is very destructive. The person may go, take the aggression workshop, come back exactly the same, because the person is completely closed. We can come to the Spiritist Center to receive passes, but if I decided I don't trust it, I don't want anyone fanning me with that little hand going above me. What is that for? I can get a fan at any store, right? Why do I need to go all the way there, drive all the way there, just to get someone, to fan me? That's it. You won't benefit anything from it. So the improvement plan later on comes almost naturally. The biggest step is really the awareness. The awareness slash acceptance. Now, later, when you're going to implement a particular technique or a particular change, that can take a long time, but it's not hard because you have accepted that you need it, that it will be good for you. So the true point, the bottleneck, is really when you become aware of it and if you accept it or not. That usually is together.
Thank you, Julio. I will go with Miss Yvonne here too.
I'm gonna make Leo do a lot of workout today.
So it's just a comment about the box. I realized that it has 3 holes in it. So even though, for me, it meant that even though we live within this box, there's that opportunity to look out. So it's a kind of hope that there is the potential to look outside that box. So I thought that was
I think it's a good point. It may be, for instance, because the box is the limitation, but what is inside, we don't want it to die. And because we were talking about a sheep, an animal, a live animal, but metaphorically, then it had to have holes. But for instance, be careful, because if you say it has to have 3 holes as opposed to 2 or 4 or anything else, then you are like the bean counter. You lose sight of the box and you just concentrate on the hole. And the hole is what? Nothingness. So, but I like, very good point. Yes. What we see inside, we want to keep alive.
I want to give you a very simple example. We have a parrot at home, and he was very friendly with my husband, but he chews everything, if you leave it loose. So my husband had to keep him in a cage, and he likes the comfortable his comfortable cage normally. And then I, out of the sun, I said, well, I'm going to leave the door open and see what happens. So since I started leaving the door open, he started going up the cage. He goes around the cage. He knocks, everywhere. And if we close the cage, when he's inside, he gets upset. And he starts screaming because he wants the door open. So he learned that there's something else besides his cage. So even though he is just a bird, so I think that's the way we are too. When we learn that there is more out there, we want to explore, right? Yeah, we don't
Yeah,
because we are afraid sometimes.
So it's difficult to comment because in the animal kingdom, and we are part of the animal kingdom, there is, of course, a gradation of intelligence. It's not we are intelligent, nothing else is. But we, in Spiritism, we put a divider. We have human beings and all the other animals. But we understand, even though we do that when we discuss things, we understand that there is a gradation. So we are going to find some levels of or prodromes of intelligence, so intelligent behavior that is now moving away from the instinctive. But animals are still primarily instinctive. But if we now try to associate that to human behavior, yes. If I tell you, and this is what usually we say reverse psychology, right? When you don't want a child to do something, you just say, don't do that, and they do it, right? So basically, you're just closing the box, or you're just closing the cage. And then they're going to get upset. But in this case, you want them to get upset, or you want them to do it. So it's like the reverse psychology. But for human beings, if possible, not use these trickeries, because eventually we grow out of them, and the first impression is never a positive one. To be tricked into something is not really now I'm talking about the general thing for human beings, okay? To be tricked into doing certain things is not positive, because we can evaluate and we are going to find ourselves berated under those conditions, or mocked even. And eventually the answer that we are going to have is much more explosive than what the other person originally thought it would be.
Very well. Thank you, Julio. Just a comment. This is from Jefferson de Lima Guimarães online, saying, judging is normal. Our mind is programmed to judge, analyze, dissect. The moment someone approaches us, we automatically starts to judge the person as familiar or unfamiliar, friendly or hostile. The problem is not so much the judging, but the fact that we are very often sentencing people as good or bad too quickly without taking the time to get to know them first. Just a comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely true. The fact that we evaluate something doesn't mean it has to be an immediate evaluation. We live in a society, our society is one of instant gratification. So everything is done very, very quickly for yesterday. And in these processes, our box is still very small. In other words, we have a lot of limitations. And we have to always remember, when I am judging, even if I have the best of intentions, I am judging with only a small amount of information. I am bound to make mistakes. This is when time kicks in and assists us. And judging, which means just to evaluate, assess, dissect, that's right, is not sentencing. Exactly. Very good point.
Very well. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, please.
I have a question. You can notice that in all those characters that it was brought, all those people, there is one thing in common. They only focus on what they want to see, right? They have only one main focus. No matter whenever the prince would bring them a different vision, a different point of view, they would not focus because they were not interested to. So why do you think it's so difficult for us humans, right, to not observe around and at least try to hear what somebody else is saying and try to observe, okay, maybe I have a different path, and how that relate also with our spiritual journey here in the earth?
We usually put down the ego in us. I'm not talking about the ego when we say something, oh, that person has such a big ego that when he or she is in the room, we can't even breathe. No, it's not that the ego from our everyday conversations. I'm talking about the ego from Freud, a part of our minds, okay? The ego came after the instincts, the id. And the ego was what was responsible for individualizing us, for giving us individualization. Not individuation, individualization. What makes me different from you, from him, from anyone here. So we owe the ego a lot. But in doing so, and in order to do so, it had to listen to, basically, let's put it this way, his own voice, or its own voice, I should say, its own voice. So now we are trying to get more of a balance between the ego and the self-access. Not so much ego, but a little bit more self. So in order to do that, we have to relinquish control. Relinquishing control is learning to see other things, not just people. This is why they all have this trait. Alone, because we isolate ourselves when we do this. Whenever we have one of those characteristics, in the end, there is an isolation. But that isolation, at one point in our growth, was important, in the growth of the individualization, but not anymore. We have gone through that step. Now we have to open ourselves. We have to go more towards the superego, according to Freud, or to see the others, to have more of an ethical balance in our lives, to see others, not just ourselves. Now, our individualization is a social one. I want to see myself in a social context, not just myself versus each person in particular, but myself in a group, myself in a city or in a country, and so on. And learning and respecting that, like me, others are also seeing and doing the same way, so that there is more of a respect that goes around as opposed to just me, myself and I.
Thank you, Julio. I would like to almost finalize with this question. Oh, sorry.
Hi. So we learned that the more of something we have, the less value it, it's less valuable. So we can also say that quality is better over quantity. Correct?
Another way, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So another way, but like we can control that by practicing delayed gratification. Like if we work hard enough to achieve something, then it becomes more cherishable. But if we get something too easily, then we don't value that thing that much. But like, isn't it ironic against our basic nature? Because like humans are basically wired to always exploring, always growing, always learning. So if we become content and then we stop growing, that isn't that ironic to what we learned? Like the more of what we have, the less valuable it is. So how do we balance both these things? Like keep growing, keep learning, but also we know that enough is enough. Like we have enough. So how do we balance that?
So let's go to Eric Fromm. To have or to be. And do you have insomnia? And that's an example he gives in the book, by the way. Do you have insomnia? Oh, you do. So tell me, which supermarket did you go to and which aisle did you go to buy that or get it? We don't have insomnia. We are insomniacs, or we cannot sleep. And he actually gives, I don't remember, to be honest with you, I must confess, but he gives like a whole page where the person goes to the doctor. It's a fictitious situation, right? That the person goes to, doctor, I have a problem. I have insomnia. I have this, I have that, I have that. And then in the end, the person doesn't have anything. How can you have a problem? A problem is not something you grasp, right? You are in difficulties. So this is the situation here. Everything that we have diminishes in price if we have more of it. But everything that we are increases in price. The more friends, the more friends I bring to my side, the more friendly I behave, the more precious these interactions are. But I don't own the friendship. I don't have friends. I am friendly to them. It starts with me. When I say I have friends, it's almost as if I went there and I grabbed something. Yes, it's a possession. And it's not necessarily, but as a rule, it's almost as if it came from that point towards me, because I am the center of everything, the king. But when I am a friend to someone, it starts with me. And in that sense, whether there is delayed gratification or not, a good point, but it doesn't really matter because it starts with me. So if the other person is going to reciprocate or not a problem, because I am a person who is friendly with somebody else. Joanna says in the book Psychology of Gratitude that true gratitude never gets anything back. It doesn't have reciprocation. If the other individual decides to reciprocate, that individual is now being friendly or charitable on his or her own terms, but not because he or she received charity or friendship from me. It's not a contract between the two sides. And Divaldo Franco always likes to say, if you have someone, if you have a person that hates you, leave that person. That's his or her problem. You do not have hatred towards that individual. So it is something that comes from that side towards you, not the other way around. What we are is from us to the world.
Thank you so much. Great questions, everyone. And I would like to finalize with Alba's question when she says, Julio, did you include in the title word Ângelis to imply her marvelous work in human psychology?
Thank you, Alba. I made a joke there. Saint, from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, the Ângelis, because the explanations come from the psychology series of Joanna de Ângelis. Yes. This is why I never wrote a synopsis. I would have given it away. I tried. I know Daniel did not like very much, you know. He was saying, no, the whole time, right? No. What am I going to write on the website? I need to have something. But I said, no, you're not going to have anything. But you see how difficult it would have been. If I had said anything, I would have given it away.
He was being the lamplighter. Sorry, Daniel.
So that was it. That's why I didn't say anything. But it's still, which asteroid you're from. And sometimes, like I said, we hop from one to the next many times over.
Well, Julio, thank you so much. We would like to extend this as we participate on our fundraiser. But before that, we would like to invite everyone to take a moment to thank, right, with one another and pray together. So we'll give some time to ourselves to get together, as well as we will be serving the water too. Jeanette, would you like to turn off the light, please? We know it's a little bit hard with the smell of the food and everything, but let us take this moment to acclimate ourselves once more and bring it back to ourselves in this moment of prayer that we will propose to one another. Let us thank one another first to be here with us, giving our thanks mentally and spiritually. Let us hug one another to partake in this moment that we come to look for answers. A shoulder, a hand, knowing that we have brothers and sisters just like ourselves that are looking, seeking a better life for ourselves is very welcoming, very warming. This way, we acknowledge one another and we acknowledge our brothers and sisters on the other side of life that are also praising our presence here. Our mentors, the mentors of the SSB, our Master Jesus, as we were reminded through Julio to be like children, to share this curiosity, to share moments like this in our lives, to wake up from the difficult constructions that we create within us and to be children again, to discover ourselves, to discover the unity, forgetting our essence, the essence of others, allowing ourselves to grow, and most importantly, participating on the process of growth of others. This way, dear Lord, guard each one of us, guard moments like this in our hearts, so that we can participate in the future on many others. Finally, help us to somehow, in our daily lives, share these moments through our good deeds, through our good actions, through the moments that we look in the mirror and we try to understand ourselves, that we are kind to ourselves, that we are indulgent to our past, living in the present, and projecting the future, hopefully a better person. Let us give thanks to this moment, to our Creator for allowing us to come together once more, asking also for the blessings, for the water that we're about to receive, for the moment and the meal that we are about to eat together. Bless our fundraiser tonight. And so be it. We would like just to ask everyone for a couple minutes so we can share the water, then we will give further instructions on what we would like to do for us to have our fundraiser.